Hi, this is Benjamin Davidson, and this is my reflection number 7. For this week's reflection, I looked at 7 things you should know about haptics. I had no idea what that was before looking into this some more. I looked up a couple of videos on YouTube to see some examples of it as well. Um, Basically, it's using a computer, people create virtual representations of a real world experience or a real world physical object. They can simulate things like heat, touch, what kind of like feel, like if you're feeling a fabric, um, uh, you can sort of get an idea of mass from that too. You could demonstrate all kinds of different things through feel, through kinesthetic feeling, which is something that typically we don't necessarily get in traditional computer use. Like that's typically using just your sight and your um, what was it? Sight and all right, it's sight and one other sense. I know that, but haptics allows for kinesthetic learners and people that learn through movement and through touch, gives them an opportunity to learn because typical classrooms are designed in the sense that they are designed for learners that are um, more visual or auditory. That's what it is, visual or auditory. um, and so essentially, uh, this could be very useful in a classroom. It could be very useful in classrooms, and it sort of opens the door for kinesthetic learners in a way that the door hasn't been opened before. It allows for things to happen that haven't been traditionally what's been able to happen in a classroom. Um, Let me think here. Uh, hmm. Well, this is exciting for a number of different reasons. Um, it allows students, like I said, to do things that they haven't done before in the classroom and learn in different ways. It broadens the amount of tools that we have at our disposal to teach as teachers. Um, and I could see this being done in, for example, you could do virtual dissections in a biology class, or you could do, they were talking about in one of the videos that I had seen, which I'll be posting as well, uh, there was physics. You could do physics experiments in virtual reality. And you can also, there's another video that I'm going to post that shows this in a video game where there's an electrocuted wall, or a wall that's sort of they've got a VR glasses on, and there's a wall, and the haptic gloves actually push back against the guy that's in the video, and it's unbelievable. It's pretty amazing. Um, the implications that I see this as, students could go on a tour of museums. Students could go on a tour of virtually any place on Earth. They could go visit things. They could go visit a desert if they live in the Arctic. They could, and vice versa. If you live in the desert, you could feel snow. You could talk about different natural habitats. I see it particularly being useful in biology, um, and also for music. Uh, there's some interesting um, there's some interesting implications because if you could virtually play an instrument uh, through the feel of if you're like a violin, what does that feel to play the violin, or what does it feel like to buzz on the mouthpiece of a brass instrument like a trumpet or a French horn, or a trombone? Um, you could simulate these things with haptic devices, and even if students don't have the instrument, they could still practice and learn. And that has enormous implications for example, students wouldn't need to have access to instruments to be able to learn to play those instruments, which is unbelievably cool. Because kids that maybe if I can imagine that many school districts don't have the money to spend, especially in small towns and rural areas. They don't have the money to spend on buying specialized instruments like a baritone saxophone, or like other types of instruments, like percussion instruments. Maybe they don't have very many percussion instruments. I know percussion sometimes has a very large battery of different types of instruments that you can hit and play in other ways. And if you don't have the money to spend on those instruments, you can still teach your students how to play them. And I could see that being just like the coolest thing ever, because then it allows for those students that don't have access in areas that are sort of like music deserts, like sort of like food deserts, right? But like instrument deserts. Kids could learn about how to do this, and then also be admitted into schools after in college and beyond, and be able to go learn on real instruments where they can actually rent an instrument, and broadening this to everyone, I think is a pretty amazing opportunity, in terms of not only biology and all these other areas, but I'm thinking, since I'm a musician, I think of it in terms of music. Um, so I'd obviously want to do that in class, if it ever comes to, if we're ever able to have haptics materials and haptics lab in a public school or in schools somewhere, to be able to use haptics to teach music. That would be really awesome. Also for building and designing instruments, I could see an implication there too. You could design a brand new instrument without ever having to actually put it together in the real world. You could just program on the haptics in your haptics software program, and be able to design a brand new instrument, which is just the coolest thing in the world. So yeah, I think those are the implications for me. Going forward, that would be a really amazing opportunity. um, yeah, another implication. Let me think about it. Another implication would be for students that don't have the opportunity to don't have the opportunity to go to, like, for example, like the Chicago Museum of Art, or like Natural History Museum in New York. They could visit these museums and actually feel some of the exhibits and touch things, and be able to really experience those places almost as if they were really there, which, especially for kinesthetic learners, is something that would be really valuable. And not only for kinesthetic learners, but for auditory or visual learners too. They have just as much to gain from haptics as I think others do. And so, yeah, I think this is really cool, and I'm really glad I read this article, and I'm really glad that our professor had posted it. It's quite interesting, and I'm very, very, very excited about it now that I know it's happening, and that this is a thing that I thought this sounds like something that is just in the future, like super far in the future. Like this is like, but it's happening right now. There's people designing this stuff right now, and using them, Stanford and other schools, which is just incredible. And I'm really excited about haptics, and excited for the implications for music, but also for other fields as well. Thank you. This has been my reflection number 7. My name is Benjamin Davidson. This is my last one. Signing off. Have a great day.